What's good, Hoopers? My name is Marco Lopez, Doctor of Physical Therapy and co-founder of the Basketball Doctors. Our goal for the Basketball Doctors is to provide evidence-based information regarding rehab, performance, and injury prevention for basketball players. This is all information for educational purposes, not medical advice. If you're dealing with an injury, feel free to reach out to us or visit your local physician or physical therapist. So for today's topic, we're going to go over how to decrease your risk for ACL injuries through hip strengthening. So before we go into more about the ACL prevention and everything, check out this video for ACL Information 101. It goes over everything that you need to know about ACL injuries and how they're torn and everything like that. But we're going to talk about the hip component. But I'll give you guys a quick summary of the ACL. So the ACL is the anterior cruciate ligament. It goes from this bone here, the femur, to this bone here, and it provides that stability in the knee joint. So when you tear it, you lose that stability in the knee. And then the way you tear it, there's several ways to tear it, or several kind of ways to tear it, meaning there's a contact way and a non-contact way. We'll break it up that way. And usually what happens in a contact, someone hits you, non-contact, your knee just gives out. And most of the time what happens is your knee comes in or goes into that valgus where your hip goes into internal rotation, your foot goes into external rotation, and it causes that point of no return where it puts the maximal stress on the ACL, and that's where you have the tear. And that's why people talk about make sure your knees don't come in, because when you land or anything, if your knee comes in, that's what puts the most amount of stress on that ACL. So how can we decrease that? One of the ways is hip strengthening. So the glutes, and you guys probably heard about that, like it's all about the hoops, get some glute activation. So the glutes play a huge role in decreasing that because the glutes, especially the glute max, it externally rotates your knee. So your femur here. So what happens is when you tear your ACL, your knee goes this way. The glutes will help do the opposite motion. So the glute max, what it does, it extends the hip, externally rotates the hip, and abducts. So pretend this is your hip bone here, this is your femur, so the hip's here. So what it does, it rotates your hip, it also brings it back, and then brings it out to the side. That's important because if you think about it, the ACL is the complete opposite. So what happens when you tear your ACL, you go into internal rotation, adduction, and some slight flexion. So what we're trying to do is we're going to strengthen the muscles to decrease those non-contact injuries, because as I mentioned, a contact injury, if someone hits you, you can have the strongest glutes in the world, you're still going to tear that ACL. But when you're working on a non-contact injury, if you train those glute muscles and worked on those movement mechanics, it's going to play a huge role in decreasing your risk. However, the tough part is the glute max is a hard muscle to strengthen because one, it's a postural muscle with one of the least representations in the motor cortex, meaning you don't have too much part of the brain focusing on the glute muscle itself. Two, the glute muscle also has a lot of muscles to compensate for it. So what happens is, as I mentioned, the glute max externally rotates the hip, abducts, and extends, means goes back. The hamstring muscles and the adductor magnus also help the hip extend. The TFL muscle also helps the muscle abduct. So there's a lot of these muscles that do the same function of the glute, but we want to make sure we're strengthening the glute because it does all three at the same time. So one of the things we have to be working on is really feeling that muscle doing those actions. That's why we're going to go over a series of 3 exercises that we need to master before we progress into other different exercises. So we're really going to be working on isometric holds for the glute max, because research has shown that if you hold that position, let's say an isometric exercise, it improves the encoding process, so meaning the ability for your brain to really feel, oh, that's my glute working, because it has, like I mentioned earlier, it has the least representation in the motor cortex. So you need to work harder to feel that muscle working. So we're really going to be working on isometric holds in positions where we have minimal weight bearing, meaning we're not going to be standing up doing the exercises, we're going to be doing them at a position where we really just focus on activating the glute, feel that, then we'll progress to different ones. But today, this is the part 1, and we're really just working on encoding and feeling the glutes. So check out these next 3 exercises. All right, guys, for the first exercise, we're gonna go over a side plank with the clamshell hold. It's gonna be a great exercise to not only target the glute max, but also our core at the same time. Because if we don't have our core engaged, it's not gonna put the glutes in an optimal position of fire, and we're gonna hold it on. So all you need to use is any kind of band here around your knees. You're gonna start off in a side plank position. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get in here position where my knees are aligned with my trunk and my elbow, and my legs are behind me. From here, I'm gonna go into a side plank. So I'm gonna side plank on my knees. So instead of having it on my feet, on my knees. Here I'm gonna be working the core, also my glute. From there, now I'm gonna open up my hip. So I'm gonna open it up, out, back, and out to the side. So I'm rotating a little bit, and I'm gonna hold that position. So here, not only am I gonna be working this hip, I'm also working this hip and this core here on this side, preventing me from falling down. So I'm gonna hold this position. Biggest things we're looking for is keeping that straight line. I don't want you kind of sagging in here. Other thing is opening up here. I don't want my foot coming down. I wanna make sure I have a good contraction here. Another thing that we're also looking for is for your trunk not to rotate inward, have it a straight line alongside here. And you hold that for up to 60 seconds. You're gonna feel a big engagement here on the glute muscles. All right guys, so number 2 exercise is gonna be the sideline hip abduction. And we're gonna go over some of the common things to look for and common things not to do. So again, we're gonna use a strength band, a little TheraBand, place it above your knees. If it gets easier, then we can put it at the feet, but we'll start off at the knees. We're gonna be in a sideline position. So I'm gonna be laying down on my side. I wanna engage my core a little bit. So I don't wanna just like rotate my body here. I wanna make sure I'm nice and tight. Front leg's gonna be here. I'm gonna be working my right leg. So my right leg's gonna go back a little bit. So I'm gonna do hip extension, externally rotate and abduct my leg. And I'm gonna be in this position here. So as you can see, my body's aligned. I'm not rotating my body this way as I do this exercise. I'm still facing straight forward and my hips going into that position. Also, what I don't wanna do is arch my back too much. So I'm engaged here in my stomach as I'm holding this leg here. And you see how my legs rotated out? I'm in that hip extension, abduction, and rotation. And I'm gonna hold this position. I should feel burn here in this butt muscle because I'm targeting that glute max. Because remember, the starting position, you start here aligned. Then I'm gonna go back, hip extension, abduction, and external rotation. And I should feel that butt muscle working. You're gonna hold that for up to 60 seconds. You should feel this burn here. Exercise number 3 for hip strengthening to prevent ACL injuries. It's gonna be the quadruped fire hydrant. Great exercise to target the glutes, but also work on your core as well. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have a band around our knees. We're gonna go in quadruped position, so hands and knees. From here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lift up my right leg. I'm gonna go into extension, abduction, and external rotation. So my hip is doing the motions of the glute max. My core is engaged. I try to bring my belly button towards my spine. I don't wanna arch my back when I'm doing this exercise. I wanna keep my back straight, belly button in towards my spine, and then go into that extension, abduction, and external rotation. Hold that position. I should feel a burn here in this glute. Hold that for up to 60 seconds. What we don't want is for me to rotate out. I'm being strong and stable here, and I'm really feeling this glute working here and this stomach engaged. Hopefully you guys learned something today about how the glute max plays a huge role in decreasing your risk for these ACL tears. So I mentioned the glute max. The way we're gonna train it early on is isometric holds. Hold it for that prescribed amount of time to really start that encoding process and feel the glute muscle working. So if you liked our video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button so we could try to reach as many hoopers as we can. And if you guys have any questions about ACL injuries, why we chose this exercise, please comment below. We try to answer every comment. But yeah, we're the basketball doctors. Let's ball for life.